Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dispo Growth Summit. We're going to be talking about something that's absolutely critical, and that's how we train our bud tenders, what we do to drive bud tender sales. We're going to talk about how to do that with Kurt Kaufman. Now, Kurt is the co-founder and CEO of Seed Talent. Seed Talent is the cannabis industry's leading bud tender and brand training hub. Their online platform provides bud tender education, brand training, and employee enablement. We'll talk a little bit about that. Kurt and his company has a very science-based approach and data-driven learning platform that helps dispensaries and brands drive sales results. Today, Kurt's going to give his insights and share his perspective. How many dispensaries are you working with now, Kurt, nationwide?
Over 1,500 across 25
Wow.
states.
Wow, that is absolutely fabulous. So obviously, working with 1,500 dispensaries, bud tenders, all of that, Kurt has a wealth of knowledge to share with you about how you can train top-performing bud tenders. Let's start off with, Kurt, in your opinion, and what you've seen and what data is telling you, what are some of the key skills and knowledge areas that every bud tender really needs to possess to be effective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, at the most basic level, product knowledge is really key. That's a big focus of our platform, is ensuring that they understand the features and benefits of the products. I think one of the things that we really try to strive to focus on is value selling, which is utility divided by price. And those folks need to really understand the utility that's being driven by those products. So I think that's probably the most baseline that folks understand and kind of know. Customer service, I think, is a big piece, and then active and empathetic listening, I think, would probably be the big overarching success in any sales role, is your ability to really understand the challenges that your customers or patients are having, and then that product knowledge comes in with your ability to then connect those challenges to solutions offered within the stores.
Okay. Focus a lot on product knowledge. Obviously, a lot of people do that in the industry. How important is product knowledge versus the soft skills, the sales type skills?
Yeah, I think they're not mutually exclusive, right, in any way. And this has been some of the conversations that I've enjoyed with you is, the layered approach between, can you take those soft skills, those active listening, and then some of the not so soft yet still not cannabis specific, the ability to really upsell, cross sell, bundle sell, solution sell with those folks. But that's all rooted to me in a real deep understanding of the solutions, which are going to be the products, the plant materials, the different things that can ultimately meet those challenges that the consumers and patients are walking in. And I would highlight that I don't think that falls on just the medical side. I'm a big believer that anybody who's walking into a dispensary or utilizing cannabis products is seeking out the wellness benefits. And so I think that solution selling is sometimes left out in rec conversations, because people think they're coming in just to get high. But as a daily cannabis consumer my entire adult life, yes, I love getting high, but there's always kind of that underlying wellness purpose. And I think that's where there's huge opportunities, is marrying that product knowledge that's ultimately going to be the solutions with the soft skills, such that somebody's then open to those solutions and understanding that you're not selling for selling's sake, but you're ultimately trying to solution with them towards the challenges that they've already presented.
One of the realities that we as dispensary operators need to be aware of is that our bud tenders, we really compete for their attention. They have a lot of things going on in their life. They have a lot of media. They have a phone in their hand constantly everywhere they go. They have a lot of things that are competing for attention. You've had the unique opportunity to work with 1,500 dispensaries and a lot of different brands. Are you seeing some innovative training methods or techniques that are being used that you might want to spotlight or talk about?
Yeah, so I mean, our probably marquee offering, I'm obviously a bit biased, but I think is the thing that is most unique in the space right now as it relates to training, which is really a data-led approach. You alluded to that at the beginning. So we have a solution called data-driven learning, where we're actually able to tie into those point of sale systems, those operational data sets, whether it be POS, whether it be some of the customer service tracking software that's out there, and really identify underperforming employees, ultimately automatically deliver them selected training content or intervention events. And then I think the big thing that's helping some retail leadership understand the value of training is that solution then can ultimately measure the impact from an ROI, revenue generated, additional items sold, those types of things. Because I think that's one of the challenges in cannabis is, unlike other environments that have been training for dozens of years or decades, whatever it may be, that are now then moving to some of the more advanced technologies and things that we've discussed in the past. I think so much of cannabis is getting back to the basics of really understanding, again, soft skill training, product training, those types of things. The challenge, though, I think, to your point, is how do you get the mind share of not just the bud tender, but the mind share of that retail leadership to understand that, yes, compliance is important, but compliance is baseline, right? Training is not just checking boxes. Training is the one thing really that you can do right now, with the exception of maybe, also your dispensary layout and design, that's really focused on your customer experience. And so for us, I think the data-driven learning piece we're really excited about, because it's connecting those KPIs that are so crucial, that revenue, that profitability, those different metrics, to the fact that, yes, training can take time, but there's value in that. And I always continue to emphasize that if you're a retailer who's focused purely on efficiency and not adding in those additional layers of customer experience, you're leaving tons of revenue on the table. And you're also causing turnover and churn from not just your employees, but also those customers who are just going down the block for that better experience.
Yeah, one of the things, just another segment of the Dispo Growth Summit is one that I'm actually doing, where I show them how to kind of really calculate what kind of money they're leaving on the table. And it's eye-opening when you really look at it. To your point, when you talk about focused on data-driven learning and identifying underperforming employees, are we identifying underperforming employees compared to the store, compared to the chain, or compared to an industry average, or all three?
That's a really great question. And so we have the capacity to do all three. What we really focus on, though, is we create an average by location. Because I think one of the challenges that we've heard from budtenders on is that they're being asked to hit arbitrary targets that are either completely out of whack, or maybe work in one state or one city, but ultimately don't transfer over to the store or the market that individual bud tender is operating in. And so what we've developed is a solution that creates an average by location for KPIs such as average basket size, percentage of basket of goods that goes to house brands, percentage of upsell that happens on the point of pickup. And then when you're identifying an employee that needs additional support, it's not that you're picking on them, you're comparing them to the average person within their location. And what we found is it's a lot better received by the bud tender, because it's not arbitrary, right? What we're trying to do is, and where averages are kind of fun, is as you improve that bottom performer, or as your top performers continue to improve, the average line is always going to continue to move up. And that's really crucial, building that culture of learning, that it's never over, right? We're always pushing to increase that average by the store, because that means our profit and our revenue is following suit.
I'm going to editorialize just a little bit, but the reality is by doing it in the same location, all of those bud tenders have the exact same products, they have the exact same customers, they have the exact same deals, they're running at the same time. And as to your point, it is a really nice baseline to compare how people are doing and to identify that. Now, let's segue into another thing that you want to talk about. Obviously, I'm running a dispensary and I have my goals and I have my objectives, and a brand has their goals and their objectives. How do we match the two up in a training platform and an environment that's productive for me as a dispensary operator?
Brian, I think that's the question of the decade in cannabis right now. And I think is a very astute observation. And for me, I believe they're intrinsically aligned. I think one of the things that is so crucial, again, is, and you're going to keep hearing me say it, is that guest experience component. And at the end of the day, the guest doesn't care necessarily about just buying your house brand. They care about buying the thing that's ultimately going to meet their need, or the solution best. And so I think, one of the challenges in the space right now is a lot of the brands want to be in every store. That's not future realistic. You don't see that, with the exception of a handful of brands that are just kind of those universal brands. You just don't see that in most other sectors. And so I think one of the things that's going to ultimately be an evolution of our industry is brands building trade programs for their retail partners, finding retail partners that ultimately align with those trade programs, And just to define what a trade program is, a trade program is anything that's set up generally in a business to business environment between a brand and a retailer or a reseller of their product that says, hey, if you, retailer, do these things to help promote and move my brand, in return, I will do these things to grow your success at retail. That can be discounts, that can be co-marketing dollars, that can be pop-ups, whatever it may be. But the big takeaway, recognizing that the audience of this summit is really focused on retail, is really identify the brands that most align with your ethos. Really, I think, consolidate your product selection to the point that you have good, better, best, couple options in each category, not overwhelming your customers, but really building that thoughtful pattern. And then find the brands that are out there in your markets that are ultimately going to lean into your vision for your store, provide those co-marketing opportunities and those support. But I'm a big believer that there's a lot of marriage between those two things. We just are, I think, at the time trying to be everything to everybody, which makes sense because there's not necessarily that history yet, but I believe that's the evolution that's going to take place here.
Outstanding. Let's talk a little bit about, and talk a little bit about, I've got a budtender that's been with me 5 years or been in the industry. Let's talk about something, my little pet peeve. I'm hiring new budtenders, and I've hired someone that's been in the industry 5 or 6 years. Do I need to worry about training that person the same way I do someone coming direct off the street?
You better believe you do, and sometimes even more so.
Amen.
Yeah.
Talk about that, because I know you've seen this in 1,500 dispensaries. You've had to see this. Let's address that, because it's a trap. People feel, hey, Harry's got all this knowledge, or Mary knows everything about weed, and we're good with Mary. Let's put her on a register and let her go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so one thing that we're really passionate about is recognizing legacy skill sets, right? There are so many people, particularly in West Coast markets, but also Midwest, East Coast, that are coming from traditional or legacy markets and have so much to bring to modern cannabis. But one of the things I think we all need to be cognizant of is, I've been a daily cannabis consumer my entire adult life. I've been a home grower. I've, worked almost every role in this space. And one of the things I'm constantly reminded of is how much I don't know. And I think that culture of learning has to be prevalent in everything that we're doing because of the pace of innovation in this space. And I don't just mean pace of innovation as it relates to new product launches or new states coming online, but fundamentally the foundational science of cannabis is so, to say we've scratched the surface, I think is an understatement. There's so much research that needs to be done. We're seeing great research coming, globally now, and new cannabinoids are being discovered or synthesized, new interactions between terpenes and that entourage effect, new products coming out that ultimately interact with our body's endocannabinoid system differ. And if you are hiring folks who give the impression that they know what they need to know already, and they're not planning on growing, not only is that a massive red flag as it relates to cannabis, but then that also, I think, becomes a challenge as we're working to continue to evolve our retail models and the way that our customers and patients need to be serviced as it relates to these products. So I am very passionate. I talk to a lot of folks who feel that they've been around the block enough times that they already know. And the other thing I guess I would just quickly highlight is one of the other challenges is people who believe that their individual experiences therefore then are everyone's experiences.
Right.
With it. So that's, I think those are kind of two in the same challenge, where we got to be really empathetic to our customers and our patients, and we got to be really open that this is a constant learning environment.
And to again expand on your point, even professional athletes every year go through some sort of training camp and review all the basics, and that's
100%
a great thing for everybody. Now, you talked about data-driven learning. And we all obviously understand that data-driven learning, one of the big things that can identify for us is if a budtender is not selling as much as someone else. What other things can data-driven learning pinpoint for us?
Yeah, so percentage of basket of goods to house brands, that's something that we're seeing as a big need for a lot of particularly vertically integrated operators.
Yep.
Again, we want to always provide the best solution for folks.
Hmm.
But if you're able to sell house or focus brands, you're oftentimes doubling that margin and
Yep.
just being able to provide gentle reminders there. But we're even getting now into customer service data. If you're sending out, iRate is one of the big companies that people are using, post store visit, you're sending out a text blast that said, how did Brian take care of you today? Please let us know and leave a review. If you're starting to see average reviews starting to dip and things like that, that again ties back to that customer service experience. And what we always try to do whenever we're leveraging data, and I would encourage folks to do this kind of whether it's on the training side or across their business, is what is the offsetting metric, right? If we're trying to increase sales or we're trying to increase sales of a certain product, the offsetting metric is customer service, right? Because the last thing we want somebody to do is, yeah, they bought, more than they intended to, but the experience was so bad they're never coming back.
Right.
And so anytime you're kind of doing a metric in one way, what's the other thing you want to keep an eye on to ensure that you're not just gamifying to the metrics, but you're ultimately raising the business overall, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Bravo. Because again, I think a lot of people fall into a trap. They look and they see Brian's sales are great, but they don't look beyond the fact that Brian never sells concentrates. Or
Exactly.
right. Or Brian's customer satisfaction rating is 2 points lower than everybody else in my store, or what have you. Generally your top seller probably has your top customer satisfaction rankings as well, generally. But to your point, there's other ways we want to go just beyond the raw dollar number to see what else is going on. And the platform does that for them, right?
100%. And
Yep.
if I can give an example real quick on that, one thing that has become a big trend in cannabis retail is kiosks. And what we're seeing is, people focused on efficiency metrics. And this isn't a knock by any means on kiosks, but we're seeing folks gamify to efficiency metrics. Yeah, we got people in and out faster, whatever it may be. But what we're seeing is average basket size is sometimes dipping. But the big piece that we're hearing is lack of customer satisfaction.
Yep.
That people are saying, man, that did not add any more incremental value to my retail experience than just sitting on my couch and ordering. I think people sometimes lose sight, like Starbucks and McDonald's, those kiosks work because their menu, right? It's intuitive to the way that you're living, your life. But the challenge with cannabis is people, even if they are a regular shopper, that menu's turning over. There might be things deep dove, in there, or they might be a heavy flower consumer that would be a great candidate to try concentrates.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that kiosk isn't making that recommendation. And so that's one of the things that I do highlight, that there's a tool for every job, but you have to understand that offsetting metric. And again, the kiosk one would be customer satisfaction, customer happiness, customer retention for that thing? Or are they missing that interaction with that star bud tender that no longer, are you even able to get any data points on?
And if I'm an independent operator or I'm running 3 stores competing against a Curaleaf or somebody along that line, I need to have unique ways that I'm different than the others. And customer service and product knowledge is one big key. Let's talk a little bit about, I know, again, I'm going to lead you into an area that we really want to address, and that is you've worked in 1,500 plus dispensaries. You've touched the lives of a lot of bud tenders. The training platform that you've done have really made a difference in their career. Can you talk about how bud tenders react to good training and what really difference it means to them?
Yeah, I appreciate you highlighting that. So, I'm proud to say that actually this last week we crossed over 500,000 courses completed on the platform.
Wow.
That was something, I take a lot of pride in. And one of the things that I think has been interesting for folks is how self-motivated people are in this space to train. And I won't say everybody, but I think at times we'll talk to managers or retail leadership and they're like, I don't know if my team, has time for this or whatnot. But what we're seeing is that people are making time. And I think one of the things that is unique about cannabis that I continue to reiterate for folks on this topic is this is a passion-based industry. And so where CPG fundamentals or consumer packaged good fundamentals are sound in so many ways of the business, nobody's super passionate about Lay's potato chips. You might find that person who's
or green beans.
100%.
Right.
I've oftentimes equated cannabis a little bit. So my industry before cannabis was the motorcycle industry. Power sports is a very passion-based industry where you're not
Mhm.
just working there, 9 to 5, but once you get out, you're riding your motorcycle, you're going to weekend, events and rides and conventions and different things like that. That is cannabis. And so I think a lot of times, where I get excited is we have so many folks that reach out and they say, this is the first opportunity I've had to really feel confident in my role. This is the first opportunity I've had to go beyond just my own personal experience and the samples that the store allows me to have to really grow my broader education with the plant. And, one of the things I would highlight for folks is one of the big challenges in cannabis retail right now is the turnover. MJ Biz did an article now about probably 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago. So it talks about how long the challenge has been around how high the turnover is in the space. They listed two primary reasons. Number one, a feeling from the employee that their employer did not care about their individual professional progression. And number two, a feeling that they were not given the resources to feel confident in their role. I think like all of us, people want to go into work and know they're going to do a good job. And when you don't give those resources, it just doesn't work for anybody involved. And so we've had such great feedback, such awesome testimonials from people out in the field talking about how the opportunity to train more, and I won't say just through Seedtown, just the ability to have access to easier training is just so crucial to not only their success within the role, but their satisfaction and desire to stay in that role and continue to thrive.
And I want to echo that. That's why I led you into it. Kurt and I have had the opportunity to do a couple of events together, and the feedback from Budtenders to his platform and the training that he and his company are bringing to them has just been absolutely incredible. And we wanted you to know that as a dispensary operator, your top performers crave knowledge and crave information. The more valuable knowledge and information you can provide them, the stronger business you're going to have, and the reality is this. Don't worry about training them and leaving. You train them, they're going to stay, they're going to be better performers. If you don't train them, hey, you've got a problem. That's just the real reality. Let's move into another thing, Kurt.
Yeah.
Obviously, people learn differently. How can I, as a dispensary owner, adapt to learning styles so I still get my employees knowing what I need them to know?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a question that I think sometimes digital platforms go, oh, shit, he asked the question about training modality.
Right.
Because digital training platforms don't necessarily, they're not necessarily the best for every learner type. We really try to optimize for audio, visual, and kinesthetic or interactive learners within the confines of the platform. However, what I recommend that folks do is, Seed Talent in certain situations can be your only training solution, and it can help supplement or augment a great overall training solution. So, bringing in folks, Brian, I'll give you a plug here. Bringing in folks, like Offenbonger to come in, do really great in-person training, and then reinforce those things, within the Seed Talent platform, build that culture of learning. I'm a big believer that if your store doesn't have a training lead, oh gosh, is that such low-hanging fruit where once a month they're putting on a little seminar, they're putting on a little learning, they're listening to the staff about challenges, they're tied into the changes as we've talked about with new cannabinoids or new things going on. And so I'm a big believer, again, kind of long answer to maybe a straightforward question, but you have to find that blend and you have to lean into that blend. And then the big thing is, do you then have an infrastructure that regardless of the modality of training, that you can track that, right? And so we've now started to implement where you can track in-person trainings in Seed Talent. It doesn't have to just be digital. And I just think, again, that infrastructure and that culture of learning is just so crucial.
And I can work with a platform like yours, whether I have one dispensary or whether I have 3,000, right?
100% correct.
Yeah, a lot of tools that are available, all that type of thing. Let's talk a little bit about, are you noticing any changes? Are people using things like augmented reality or virtual reality or things like this and how they're trying to train bud tenders?
So there's a company in Illinois, Nuve, and I always say it wrong, but I believe that's right, where they've started to use some augmented reality. I think the two challenges are tight budgets in cannabis. I think one of the big things that folks don't talk about as it relates to training is with 280E, all the training expenses you would do in a normal business would be an expensible expense.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's not the case within cannabis. And so I think some of those higher end, more technology driven, innovations around training just haven't been able to get the funding or the priority yet. We're starting to see some of those things, but one of my partners makes a joke that when you enter cannabis, you almost need to get your fax machine out. And I think to a certain extent, there's a lot of folks, yeah, there's a lot of folks who are very focused on all the technology they're going to get into the business. I think training, we're kind of in the early innings, just getting people to really understand the importance of it first. But I think some of those technical changes will come here in the future, and we're certainly trying to keep an eye on it as a business.
If I'm an independent operator and I'm sitting here listening to you and thinking, oh my golly, I haven't really been training my employees the way I should and all that kind of thing. Do you have some tips about getting started?
Yeah, and I'll give a little bit of a shameless plug. Seed Talent and its baseline is free. So there is no cost associated with getting your store access to cannabis foundations training, intro to cannabis retail basics, terpene knowledge. We work with groups like Abstract Labs and different folks to really ensure that the science is there. And then we have brand training in almost, every legal state that's free for folks to access. And so whenever there's, oh crap moment, I haven't, got this set up yet, I'm a big believer that perfect can come later. You got to start with getting your team access. Intro to cannabis should be a requirement for everybody, that works in this space, including those 5-10 year vets, to make sure that they really have that consistent foundation. And then, I think leveraging the digital platforms that are out there, particularly the free resources, are awesome. And then again, I think, identifying who in your store has a propensity for that desire to learn, and putting them and empowering them to set up trainings and whatnot with the staff, it's really easy. And I think that's where sometimes so many things in cannabis are difficult that sometimes people put them on the shelf and they say, we'll get to that. Training is easy. You have free resources like Seed Talent. You have amazing internal staff that are self-motivated if they are ultimately empowered. And then I would also say potentially ultimately paid for that additional work that they're doing. And then you have great third-party consultants and different groups that you can bring in. But the idea is to, I'm a big environmental guy, and they always say the best time to plant a tree was yesterday.
Right.
And that's the same thing on education. But you just got to get started.
Let's talk about something that you and I encountered that I want to address as well. And that's somebody that feels like I'm doing a great job with in-house training. Why do I need to supplement it with something like Seed Talent or some sort of outside resource? How would I benefit by doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's kind of a couple of things, right? Which is earlier we talked about different modalities of training being important. And sometimes just sitting in there, particularly listening to a coworker, sometimes that's not the most conducive way for folks to do that. Also, pulling people off the floor is a big thing that we hear as a concern around training. So if you're doing things in-house, whether it be digitally or in person, just making sure that you're being thoughtful on that. I think where Seed Talent comes in is really in two ways for folks that have. If we're making the assumption that they have a strong internal training program, Seed Talent comes really in two additional ways, which is consistency of delivery. Can we bring all that training into somewhat of a digital format, such that you're able to then consistently deliver that message? And I should say then aggregated with all of the other training that you need to do. What we see a lot of times is in-house strong program, but then they've got a vendor training over here. They have a state compliance training over here. They have IT security over here. And so for Seed Talent, we really focus on aggregation, number one. And then number two is the ability to then have the data to support that training. We are tracking everything that happens in the platform, what courses people are taking, how long it takes them, quiz scores, test scores, those types of things, so that ultimately when you want to start understanding the impact of that training, we can then tie those pieces together to see if in fact your highest trained bud tenders are your highest performers, or the folks that need additional support are getting it, and ultimately doing it when they're asked to complete it. And so long answer again, summarized as content aggregation. Let's get everything in one spot, third party, outside, compliance, in-house, one spot, and then have the ability then to ultimately track that, because trackable data is ultimately usable data for future reference.
Not only that, gang, but one of the other things I want to expand on is using a platform like this ensures that I have consistency of training. It ensures that bud tender A, B, C, D, E, F, G are trained the same way in the same time at the same stage. So I know what I'm doing, that I'm following my sales model, really designed to get better results and premium results. A couple more quick questions and then we'll be done. Real quickly, when you start with a platform like yours and you go into a place that has not been using it, about how long is it until the operator starts to see impacts in their bottom line?
Yeah, it's a great question. So
And I know it's
onboarding,
going to vary between operators. One thing that you haven't touched on that I'm going to say is this, is that any tool is only as good as the people behind it. And you know,
100%.
if you're running a dispensary and you're not out on the sales floor, you're sitting in the office all the time, you're in meetings all the time, and you're not on the floor where things are happening, I'm going to propose to you, you're not getting everything out of your business that you could. And the same thing with Kurt's platform or any training you do. If you have your bud tenders do it, and as a manager and a leader, you don't reinforce and inspect and all this kind of thing, you're not going to get the maximum benefit out of it. So all of that said, and all the fact that there can be a lot of variables that are involved in it, I know for sure that dispensaries see sales lift. You know, about what should I be looking for time-wise?
So training has what I refer to as a long tail ROI. One of the big challenges is direct attribution in ROI. Like, can I actually isolate and say this training led to those sales? But what we're seeing is usually 60 to 90 days out, we're seeing, you know, a strong lift in ticket size, in employee satisfaction, in, you know, customer responses, if, to your point, the dispensary is leaning into it. You know, training is one of those tools that's not just about getting in and doing, it's also about implementing in them those day-to-day practices. But I'd say 60 to 90 days is when you're going to start to see the impact of training. And then the long tail on that can be, frankly, forever. I think one of the things I'd encourage anybody who doesn't believe in training, go read the reviews of the highest reviewed stores in your area. And I will guarantee the vast majority of them will talk about experiences in store. We love this bud tender. We love the customer service. We loved how much they care. You see way less reviews about, man, they had the deepest discounts in the state. I couldn't believe how cheap it was. Your folks that are getting those, you know, 4.6, you know, out of 5, those 4.8, you know, plus reviews, the vast majority of the reviews you'll read are around the customer experience, which is almost always tied back to the amount of training and emphasis of that training within the stores themselves.
If I'm watching this and I want to learn more about seed talent and how you might be able to help me, what's the best way I can go about doing all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can sign up for a free demo of the platform just on seedtalent.com. You can request a demo too, which you might be stuck with my ugly mug on that demo, but I'd be, you know, happy to hop on. And then if you're, you know, a business leader that's on today, don't hesitate to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just Kurt Kaufman at LinkedIn. Shoot me a note and then let me know that you saw us as it relates to this summit. We're just finalizing some discounts and deals that we're going to do, but folks who are mentioning that they saw us on this summit are going to get a discount on our services, because we really appreciate, again, that culture of learning. And if you're a manager or an owner that's on this call, you're somebody who's obviously really working to continue to push your own skill set, and we appreciate that.
And at the time of the live airing, it's just a couple of weeks before MJ BizCon. Kurt and his team will be there as well. You can reach out to them, and I'm sure they'll find some way to accommodate you in their schedule so you guys could all get together. Obviously, I have familiarity with the Seed Talent platform, and I'm a big proponent of it. The more important thing, I'm a big, huge proponent of training bud tenders. We really wanted to discuss that with you today because a well-trained staff can really make a critical difference in the performance of your dispensary and the sales results. In the comments section of Kurt's talk, we're going to leave all of Kurt's contact information, how you can reach him on LinkedIn, how you can reach him and his company online. I urge you to do so. As he said, it's free for you as a dispensary operator. It's a great tool and a great resource for you to add, because the best trained bud tender team are the ones that are really going to win in the long run. Kurt, thanks for your time. I appreciate it as well. I'll see you in Las Vegas. Everyone else, please watch the rest of the content that we have on the Dispo Summit. A lot of great things for you to gain from it. Until our time crosses again, Kurt, be well. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Bye
Thank you
now.
so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.